Okay, so we're gonna get started, guys. Couple of things just to look at. We're spending this entire week reviewing for the midterm. I'll kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what that looks like, but let's first take a look at our quiz test prep part over here. All right, so hopefully this isn't the first time you're looking at this, but this is the midterm review. This is kind of what it looks like, so let's just pop this open. So I treat this midterm the same way I treat the Regents exam. I can't really tell you what's on it. All right, there's no list of topics. That's not really how the Regents goes. So this is your first test. It's a little bit challenging because I don't tell you exactly what's on it. But ultimately, if you're here for this week and you study properly and you've been here for the entire year, and you really shouldn't have too much of a problem. It's all just refreshing your memory on a lot of the terms that we've dealt with over the year and a lot of the concepts. I did reshare the PowerPoints for you in case you needed to go back for whatever particular reason. There's a lot of different ways that you can be studying some of the things, but let's just go over this. So I need to change this right now. The midterm is not 45 question multiple choice. It's 50 question multiple choice. It was 45 questions last year, but since there's more of a focus on the multiple choice and you guys are online, we're going to do 50 multiple choice and a thematic essay. All right, we're going to go over a thematic essay starting today. If it's going to seem intimidating, it's almost going to seem a little mean, like, we haven't done a thematic essay all year. How could you put it on our midterm? But if you know how to do a DBQ, a thematic essay is pretty good, pretty easy to do. So I'm going to say it like this. I'm actually changing this now because some things have changed. You will not have 2 hours to complete. You'll have 24 hours to complete. Okay, and I'll explain what I mean. So when you guys come to class on Friday, you're going to have to do the multiple choice. Your goal is to be done with the multiple choice by the end of the period. Okay? The major thing that you have to understand, though, is you also have to do an essay. You will basically have the rest of Friday to complete the essay at your own pace. Okay, I can hope that you get it done by, Friday afternoon, but it has to be done by basically 24 hours. All right. There'll be no extra credit, but you do have these 4 practice quizzes. These codes are live. You can definitely practice these. There's over 200 questions amongst these 4 exams, basically. So you get some great practice. I would highly suggest maybe on Thursday or on Wednesday to start doing some of these. These would be excellent practice. And of course, my YouTube channel consists of about 60 lessons. So if you really struggled on a topic, if you don't understand something, just go back to the lesson and get a quick review on it, and that should be able to help you out. There is an unlimited amount of ways that you could study for this test. There's not one specific way. The only thing I do ask is that you do study. All right, if you try and walk into this midterm without, doing any type of review or studying more than, we're doing in class, you're going to really struggle. So please, make sure that you're doing the right thing. This is your biggest grade of the second marking period by far. All right. With that being said, let's go to our review for day 1. Okay, let's go to our review for day 1. So you have a couple things here. 2 things that you're going to open. The first thing I would like for you to open is this review doc. It looks like this. You're going to get one of these every day. And basically, you're going to get 5 terms. Okay, the first half of class, we're going to just do some review terms. And then you're going to get a historical circumstances term. Okay, and you're going to try and fill in this box, fill in the term, and then write the definition or importance of the term. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and give you about 20 to 25 words over this week that are really important, that you definitely need to know, and there's a very high chance that you will see on the midterm. All right, and these are words that we've dealt with from September to present day, January 25th. All right. It's very important that you guys are active in the chat. You guys are unmuting yourselves. And, basically, when I ask a question, because it's such a small group, that you guys are answering and trying to review as best as you can. Okay. So, with that being said, let's go to midterm review day 1. All right. So, looks like this. Oh, sorry. All right, so you're going to have 10 minutes. We're going to put 10 minutes on the clock. It's 10:28, so you have until around 10:39, okay, by the time I'm done explaining this. So what you want to do is you want to describe or define the importance of these 5 terms. Jamestown. Okay, so you can give me what Jamestown was and why it's important. The Proclamation of 1763. Reserve powers, the Emancipation Proclamation, the writs of assistance. Okay, so the first four words are a little bit more mainstream. The last word's a little bit tougher. All right, now let's say you know the word. Great, you just write down the definition in your own words, and then we could obviously add to it a little bit. But let's say you forgot everything about reserve powers. Well, I can honestly say I think it's okay to Google, believe it or not, because you just want to get a sense of, okay, what was this again? And then once you look at Google or once you look back up the word, or if you go back to your notes, really should go back to your notes, but I understand that it may be tough to find some of these words. All right. If you really struggle to find a word, then just Google it really quick so you can get a better sense of what it was. Okay. If you get a small idea of what it was, then it's fine. After you answer these 5 important terms, you want to bullet point as many historical circumstances as possible for this next term. Now, what are historical circumstances? Well, historical circumstances are you're not going to tell me anything about a topic. You're going to tell me all the causes or everything that's led up to a particular topic. And that particular topic I want you to tell me historical circumstances is the start of the Civil War. Don't tell me anything about the Civil War. Okay, tell me how the Civil War got started. What are some topics? What are some terms that are important leading up to the start of the Civil War? All right, so you're going to do these 5 terms, and then if you have time, try and do the historical circumstances. Okay, please let me know, do you guys have questions before I give you about 8 to 10 minutes to work on this? No, okay. So you should see, it should make sense now. You have 5 terms. I'll go back to them. 5 terms, write the definition. Then you have the election of 1860 and the Civil War, and then you do the historical circumstances for those. You will get used to this more and more over the next couple of days. All right, here are your terms. And I want to clarify, if you're going to Google to look up a term because you forgot what it was, do not put the Google definition. The definition has to be in your own words, and tell me why it's important for your midterm probably. Google is just to give you a refresher in case you completely forgot what the word was. Is anyone completely stuck? If you're completely stuck, unmute yourself and ask me a question. Don't just sit there without doing this. This is a very important week of review. Specifically, the government aspect of Jamestown. You don't need to really know about the struggles of the colonists when they came over, but what government came from Jamestown that was very beneficial to us growing forward. That was the huge thing. It took about another 3 or 4 minutes. Two minutes, guys. I'm going to go over all of them, Abigail. Okay, take 30 more seconds. Okay, so let's go into our review for these terms. All right, so the first term is Jamestown. This is one of the first terms we learned about. Now, in 7th grade, you learned more about it, specifically in how the colonists operated. But all you need to know for this class has to do with the colony, all right, the government. So it's the first settled colony in 1607 in Virginia, led to the House of Burgesses. That is the big regent's term we're looking at, which was the first form of representative democracy or self-government in the colonies. So our first area of where we look to our present day government was all the way back in Jamestown in 1607, where they set up basically a House of Representatives in our first colony. They didn't call it the House of Representatives, but you had the first form of a republic where people came and to this particular house in Virginia and basically voted on laws and stuff, okay, and discussed policies. All right, so that's why you need to know Jamestown. So whenever you see Jamestown, you got to think of House of Burgesses, which should get you into the review mind. All right, Proclamation of 1763. It was the line that used the Appalachian Mountains as a boundary that colonists could not move west into the frontier. This is one of the causes of the Revolutionary War. It's something King George III limited the freedoms of a lot of the people in the colonies and basically stopped them from moving westward. Remember, if they moved westward, okay, then they went into the land of the Native Americans, and if the Native Americans got into a war or a conflict, then Britain had to go and protect the colonists, and that's not something they wanted to do because they were so far away. All right, Abigail, is there anything else you need for that particular question, or does that clarify it? Excellent. Reserve powers. Okay. So a big thing in our Constitution goes over basically what levels of government are able to do what. You know, what does our federal government get to do? What does our state governments get to do? What do they both get to do? Well, the reserve powers aspect, okay, has to do with what our states can do. And this is very, these are always related to our 10th Amendment, which is one of the most important amendments for the regions, which is any power not delegated in the Constitution is reserved for the states to decide. This is the biggest example is obviously slavery, because slavery was not a delegated power. Therefore, each state got to decide if they wanted to be slave or not. Okay? So reserve powers are, you know, very big in giving states some more power. And obviously, not only slavery, but, you know, thing like gay marriage back in history, segregation, okay, back in history. These were all reserved powers. States got to decide to do what they wanted, basically. All right, so anything not said in the Constitution is reserved for the states to decide. You're taking a New York State Regents exam. Okay, that is the state deciding. It's a reserved power for them to say, okay, for them to get a U.S. history social studies credit, they need to pass this. That is a state decision, reserved power. All right. The next thing is the Emancipation Proclamation, okay, which has a couple of levels to it. Okay, so we need to know from the region's perspective is that it was a military strategy to help the North win the Civil War. Okay, now a lot of people tend to believe that it freed slaves in the country, but remember, it really doesn't. It freed the slaves in the rebellious states, which were the Confederate states, which technically speaking didn't actually free one slave. The thing that actually freed the slaves would be the 13th Amendment. So we spent some time going over this, but we need to know the Emancipation Proclamation as a military strategy because this now allowed African Americans to join the Union Army, and over 100,000 of them would join the Union Army and help them fight and win. All right. Any questions Give you about 5 seconds, see if you have any questions, and then we'll go into our last word, which is the writs of assistance. This is a tricky word. This is a word that, isn't a huge topic we covered, but you are responsible to know it. This is back during the Revolutionary War period. It was a policy by Great Britain, one of their laws, one of their rules called this. Basically, British soldiers were allowed to enter people's homes without a warrant, and allowed officers to come into people's homes, and they could look at your materials, they could look at your stuff, and they allowed you to tax any of the goods that the colonists purchased. All right, so if they saw something you didn't have a receipt for, they could tax you on it. And this eventually led to our Fourth Amendment, which basically was no search or seizure, and no one can enter your home without a warrant. Okay, this is all from the writs of assistance. They literally put this amendment in because of this law by Great Britain, and a lot of colonists were upset about this. Okay, so in the chat, you're going to give me a number, okay? Please write the number 5 if you were comfortable with all 5 of these words. Please write the number 4 if you were comfortable with 4, 3 if you were comfortable with 3 of them, 2, 1, and then 0 if you were not comfortable at all. All right, so we got 4, 4. Okay, Kiara's 4. Okay, so that's great. Excellent. So if you're getting most of the words and you remember most of the words and you feel somewhat confident, that's a good thing. Okay? All right, so let's see. I want to see something really quick. Give me 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. Okay, perfect. All right, so you're going to get some Regents questions practice in period 2 today. What I'd like to do now is go to our historical circumstances, okay? And I'm going to leave this open in the chat. You're going to give me 2 minutes. You're going to write down whatever historical circumstances you have for the election of 1860, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill them in as you go. So what things led to the Civil War? It could be general things. It could be topics, but just start writing them in the chat. Dred Scott, perfect. What else? Slavery, excellent. Abraham Lincoln gets elected, okay. I'll put this out this evening. What else? What other topics led to the Civil War? Civil War don't just happen. Slavery is the big thing. If you don't mention slavery, obviously, but there was other things. Excellent. Abolitionist movement. Okay. Economic differences. Excellent. Between 9 and 5. Okay. All right, let me ask you some questions. What were the names of the compromises? There was 2 compromises that avoided the Civil War, but ultimately led to some problems. What were the names of those 2 compromises? This is the way you want to start thinking historical circumstances. Okay, yeah, we'll definitely add stage rights. What were the names of those compromises? Okay, Compromise of 1850. And what was the one before that? Yes, Janari, excellent. Missouri Compromise. Okay, let's stop there. Are there others? Yes. Okay, but you're thinking of all the causes that led to the election of 1860. So this is part of our thematic essay practice. I guarantee your thematic essay will have a bullet point on historical circumstances, guaranteed. Okay, you want to tell me what were the events leading up to some of these major topics. Okay, and what you want to do is when you say, okay, historical circumstances, I know Dred Scott, I know slavery was a big topic, I know that the abolitionist movement was a big topic. Okay, well now you need to be able to explain what some of these things are. But the goal of this exercise is to you to kind of identify, okay, how did we get to some of these big topics in history? All right, and even though there's only a few here, you guys did a really good job. You guys got a lot of the topics here. All right, so constantly think, okay, how do we get to a specific scenario? Go back to your notes prior to that event, and then you can start listing off some things. All right, and you guys are all correct. That's a lot of, Civil War just don't happen. Okay, it's a lot of details leading up to the start of the Civil War. Okay, so now let's go to our thematic essay practice. Okay, we'll speak a little bit on this today, but ultimately a thematic essay is in some ways easier than the DBQ, and in some ways it's harder, and I'll explain what I mean. Thematic essays are generally a little bit shorter, which makes it a little bit easier, and it's generally a lot less work that you have to put in. Okay, it's a lot less work that you have to put in. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at what a thematic essay kind of looks like. So, 1 second. All right, so let's go back to thematic essay. So in a thematic essay, you're generally showing and comparing major main ideas and themes, which we're going to look at in a second, of certain situations in history. And the setup is going to be almost the exact same way of a DBQ. The only difference between a thematic and a DBQ is a DBQ consists of DBQ documents that you're going to have to incorporate in your essay and outside information. A thematic essay is only outside information. There's no DBQs. You're just going back from your own topics, your own knowledge, and adding to it. So if you have a lot of outside information on a topic, it's a very easy essay. If you don't remember much about particular topics, then it can be tough. But I will say, since you're doing this from home, you know, you have plenty of time to do it, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. You don't have to incorporate documents. Everything is outside information. All right. So if you look at a thematic essay question, maybe a little bit hard to read, but it looks almost the same. You got your historical context at the top. You have your task with the bullet points, okay? And then it's going to give you some topics. Correct, Abigail. It is tough. That makes it tough. However, if you look at the examples here, it says you may use any reform movement, which you probably don't know at this point, from 1820 to 1933. They always give you about 8 to 10 suggestions, and you need to choose 2. All right, so like right now, suggestions you might wish to include: the abolitionist movement, okay, which you guys remember, the women's suffrage movement, which you guys know a little bit about, the temperance movement, and some of these other movements. So basically, you have to choose 2 of them. Here's another example. Same type of thing, and then it gives you a total of 8 laws that you can maybe choose from. All right, the Embargo Act, the Indian Removal Act, which is the Trail of Tears, the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Okay, they're constantly giving you choices on your particular one that you need to have. Now, when you do your thematic essay, you're going to get 7 choices. Okay, I'm not going to tell you exactly what the topic is, but you're going to see the setup of the thematic essay is almost identical. I'll show you what I mean. All right, so thematic essay tips. Introduction. 2 to 3 sentences, rewrite the historical context in your own words, and then write the thesis statement. The DBQ and the thematic are the exact same setup. The exact same setup. The introduction is exactly the same. All right, then you need to figure out if it's going to be 2 or 3 bullet points. And if it's 2 bullet points, it's 4 paragraphs. And if it's 3 bullet points, it's a 5-paragraph essay. I'm telling you right now, I'm 99% sure that your thematic essay will be 5 paragraphs, because you're going to have 3 bullet points. But each paragraph will not be as long. Okay? So then usually you have paragraph 2. That's the body paragraph answering the first bullet point. This usually has to do with historical circumstances. This is why we're practicing historical circumstances right now. Right? These historical circumstances are going to be things you need to know for the Regents exam. Okay? And I guarantee it's coming up on your midterm as well. All right? And basically, the next paragraph is going to answer the second bullet point, and so on and so forth, and conclusions are exactly the same. So if you can do a DBQ essay and the setup of the DBQ essay, it's really not too tough. So now we need to kind of figure which one of the topics we have to really know about. And the way I like to break it down is we want to go to our, back to our DBQ, excuse me, back to here, okay? And we want to look at some possible thematic essay topics. And again, we're going to use the chat box, okay? We're going to go through the chat box to tell me some reform and some reform movements and so on and so forth. So here are the thematic essay major topics. Okay, so here are some topics that you will see on the regions. So I went back and looked at the last 30 years of U.S. history regions exams, and I basically was able to find out, you know what, it usually is one of these 6 topics. Okay, it always comes back to one of these 6 topics. All right, the biggest topic that comes up the most, and I will tell you, probably will not come up on our midterm, but we're going to practice it now, because a lot of reform movements come after the midterm in Unit 4, Unit 5, Unit 6. Okay, but we do know some reform movements already. Reform is another word for change. All right, and a lot of thematic essays have to do with change in American history. So what are some reform movements that we have learned in class? Why don't you guys give me 1 or 2? What are some reform movements that we learned on? Okay, excellent. Abolitionist movement's a big one. What's another one? Think farmers. Think farmers. Starts with a G. There we go. Granger movement. The abolitionist movement, the Granger movement, those are reform movements. They were looking for change. Abolitionist movement wanted change for slavery. Granger movement wanted change for farmers. You can't forget about the women's rights movement, okay, with Seneca Falls. But those are pretty much the only ones we've done at this point. Okay, those are the only ones we've done at this point. There will be a lot more movements that we learn about over the next couple of months. All right? Again, foreign policy is another big thing. Comes a lot bigger later on in this class, Unit 4, Unit 5, Unit 6, Unit 7. But what are some foreign policies that we're familiar with? There's 2 very big ones we should know. So the Embargo Act is a law. I wouldn't consider that a foreign policy. That's a law that has to deal with foreign countries. But foreign policy is how America deals with other countries. But that is a law. That's a good try. A policy is more just a strategy in how we deal with other nations. So there's 2 major ones that we've learned at this point. One comes from Washington. Excellent. Washington's neutrality. The other one comes from James Monroe and his presidency. What was that called? Monroe Doctrine. So these are some big foreign policies. All right? So I'm trying to give you as much of a hint as possible. Okay? So take this for what it's worth. If I say these are the 2 major topics for the essay on the regions, thematic essay, but we haven't done a lot of them, there's probably not a very good chance that you're going to have a thematic essay on the midterm on these 2 topics. So take that for what it's worth. They are major topics, yes, but we haven't gone over 70% of the reform movements. We haven't gone over 80% of foreign policy in this country. So take that for what it's worth. So maybe make sure we're very paying attention to some of these other ones here. Let me erase that. Okay. Let's go to laws. All right. Important laws and compromises. Is there a DBQ essay on the regions or a thematic essay? There's both on the regions. There's a DBQ essay and a thematic essay. So important laws and compromises have shaped America and come up a lot during thematic essays. Some example of legislation or laws and compromises that we learn are what? All right, well, let's start with laws. So Gentiana already gave me the Embargo Act. That's one. What is another law that we have learned in this class? A law that was created. Fugitive slave law. Perfect. Any law or act that you can think of. If it ends in law, if it ends in act, that's going to be under this here. Writs of assistance. Would I count it? Yes, it's not one you'd have to worry about because that is a law technically made by Great Britain, and that's not something we have to worry about. Give me one more law. Ah, perfect. The Jim Crow laws. And those are some examples of law. The Civil Rights Act will come in the 1960s. That's another good example. Okay. Give me 2 or 3 compromises. We've already done the Missouri Compromise and the Compromise of 1850. We've done those. Give me 1 or 2 more. What are some other compromises we learned in this class? Think back to the Constitution. Think back to Reconstruction. Some big ones. Some big ones. There was a fraction. There was a really big one. Okay, so we got the 3/5 compromise. Excellent. We have the compromise of 1877. The Great Compromise. Okay, cool. Probably 1 or 2 more, but those are fine. All right, so we got a lot of compromises. We spent a lot of time on compromises over this time. Okay, excellent. All right, huge topics, always Supreme Court decisions. And, you know, we've done a lot of Supreme Court cases. What are some Supreme Court cases we've learned in this class? I mean, we've had at least 9. We have a whole Supreme Court packet. You could just open that up and give me that one, all right? Dred Scott v. Sanford. Marbury v. Madison. What else? Cullen versus Maryland. Give me one more. Give me one more. Definitely one other big one. Gibbons versus Ogden. That's not a big one, but we'll definitely put that. Okay. Okay. Controversy says was Worcester versus Georgia, I think. Yes. Plessy versus Ferguson is the last one. Okay. Plessy versus Ferguson is the last big one I wanted, but don't you don't have to write that down just yet. All right. Sometimes you have a thematic essay on wars. There's a theme of wars, controversy, problems in our country. All right, so let's start with some wars. What were some wars that we covered throughout the first part of this year? Revo War, I'll call it. Good. Civil War. 2 more. They're not so big ones, but we definitely covered them. War of 1812, that is the year. 1 more. Think Manifest Destiny. Mexican-American War. Okay. So these are some controversies in wars. Okay. Now, it's also conflicts. So now give me 1 or 2 conflicts where it wasn't a war, but there was a battle or there was I'm not saying like the Battle of Gettysburg, but there was a rebellion or a fight or some issue within our country. Give me 2 or 3 of those. Whiskey Rebellion, perfect. What other fights or rebellions? Okay, Boston Massacre. Yeah, I think we can count that. I think we'd certainly count that. I mean, 1 more. 1 more rebellion, 1 more fight, 1 more issue. That's under the War of 1812, Gentiana, so we'll keep that under the war. Yeah, let's go with Shays Rebellion. That's a pretty big one. Okay. And the last one, okay, last one we're to go over, but many groups of people have had different experience in America than white males. Some examples of these groups of people are what? Well, What are some groups of people that have been, considered marginalized or not doing so well? Okay. Okay, Native Americans. Excellent. All right. Obviously, this goes without saying, African Americans. Abigail, I wouldn't consider the radical Republicans and minority group people. They were leaders in government, so I wouldn't consider them. Native Americans, African Americans. Give me one more group that maybe you've struggled early on in American history that we've covered. I would consider women one, yeah, absolutely. And immigrants would be another good one. All right, but these are probably the three major groups we've looked at as really struggling within this country. Okay, so here's my tip. It's probably a thematic essay that you're going to have. The topic's not going to be 1 or 2. It's probably not going to be 6. So really, you're going to have to study up on 3, 4, and 5. So how do you study this up? Well, we've already listed some topics. Okay. What I suggest is you become an expert on 2 or 3 laws and compromises. You become an expert on 2 or 3 Supreme Court decisions. You know everything about it. You become an expert on 2 or 3 wars. This way, when the thematic essay comes, you need to choose 2 topics. You have 2 topics that you need to know. Okay? And what I mean an expert is, you shouldn't just know that a Supreme Court decision's name was Dred Scott v. Sanford. You should tell me, what were the historical circumstances of Dred Scott v. Sanford? Okay, how did the Supreme Court case come about? What was the decision? How did the country change after the decision? Same thing with laws, okay? How did the fugitive slave law get passed? How did the Jim Crow laws get passed? What were the historical circumstances? How did America change after these laws or compromises? All right, so one of your thematic essay topics will be either legislation, laws, and compromises, Supreme Court decision, or controversy and wars. Okay, so I would become experts on 2 or 3 for each of these topics when you're studying. All right, and all the thematic essay is basically, take all of it out of it, take all the structure out of it, is tell me what you know about these topics. You need to be prepared. Because if you're not prepared, it's going to be tough. All right? And trust me, I've been doing this a long time. I will know what is Googled, and I'll know what is not. Yes, Janari. Janari. Was that an accident? Nah, okay. All right, so with that being said, here's what you're doing for period 2. Now, you can do this at any point throughout the day. All you need to do is, to turn in this assignment, like I'm really not grading the first 2 things we did during class, but I am grading the period 2 assignment. So please keep this in mind. Okay, if you want to create a separate Google Doc and put random answers, that's fine. Whatever, it's completely fine. You get a good grade, but like you're not helping yourself. The goal is to pass the midterm and do well in the midterm. So if you click on that, you're going to get 18 practice regions questions. Please remember that the questions go in chronological order. All right, so question 1 is always going to deal with, the very beginnings, some of the stuff we learned, geography, some of the basic stuff, and then it works in chronological order. Okay, you have 18 questions you need to answer. Go through them. Once you get to question 18, you stop. Okay, you get a separate Google Doc, label it 1 through 18, turn it in once you answer all the questions. This will be the first thing we go over tomorrow. And again, if you want to put random answers, that's fine. Okay, you should really take your time. You should put a timer on, 20 minutes, try and get these 18 questions done, and that is your second period assignment. Are there any questions before I let you guys go? No? Nope.